Hello there, everyone. I'd like to fill you all in a little bit on how exactly I started my career in the world of education, as well as some of my most popular theories. Let's start with a little bit about me. I was born Jerome Seymour Bruner on October the 1st, 1915, to my Polish immigrant parents, Herman and Rosa Gluckman. Having been born blind, I received two cataract operations while still being an infant. I attended public school and graduated from high school in 1933 to go on to study psychology at Duke University. I was and am fascinated by psychology and the human mind. I then continued on to receive my master's in 1939 from Harvard, as well as my PhD in 1941. I later came back to this university to work on the faculty staff. During my time of studying psychology, I revolted against behaviorism and psychophysics to create what was called the New Look, or New Theory on Perception. My colleague Leo Postman helped me out with this new adventure of belief that perception is not something that occurs immediately, as has been presumed previously. Instead, we believe that perception is a form of information processing that involves interpretation and selection. All of this studying led to one of my major publications, A Study of Thinking, in 1956, which explored how people think about and group things into classes and categories when it comes to the area of thinking. In addition, I began to have a deep interest in cognitive psychology and what the appropriate forms of education for children might be. This interest led to my landmark book, The Process of Education in 1960, which developed some of the key themes of educational programs. In contrast to Piaget, I looked to environmental and experiential factors when it came to cognitive growth, and looked at intellectual ability in stages and how the mind is used. In this book, I discussed the idea of motives for learning, which applies to students even today in 2012. Having an interest in the material to be learned is the best stimulus to learning, rather than external goals such as their grades or just having a competitive advantage later on in life. I really truly believe that an interest in the material is truly the best stimulus for learning for students. As a result of this book, I produced two subscripts to the Process of Education, those being called The Process of Education Towards a Theory of Instruction in 1966, as well as The Relevance of Education in 1971. The collaboration of essays in these two subscripts focused on patterns of growth and the will to learn, as well as theories on infant development. In 1972, the Center for Cognitive Studies, where I had been working, was closed, and another opportunity opened up for me, and I moved to England to teach at Oxford University. In 1980, I returned to the United States to serve again at Harvard University until 1982, where I then moved to be a professor at the New School for Social Research in New York. My main interest being solely psychology of the mind, particularly perception and cognition, as well as education. As a result of this research, I then wrote the book Actual Minds, Possible Works in 1986, which focused on literature and anthropology. This led me to write my next work, Acts of Meaning, in 1991, in which I refute the digital process approach to studies of the human mind to look more at cultural and environmental aspects of cognitive. At this point in the 90s, I began to notice a change in my theories and ideas compared to those I had established in the 1960s. I reworked my thoughts to align them more with the current era and wrote The Culture of Education in 1996. Within this book, I focused on how culture shapes our minds and ways of life, especially in the classroom. The 9 essays that make up the book delve into how individuals create realities based on cultural narratives, such as social interaction, rather than assuming that the mind is simply a mechanism for information processing. In the book, I quoted that one can construct an identity and find a place in one's culture. Schools must cultivate, nurture it, and cease taking it for granted. In 2012, I am a research professor of psychology in the School of Law at New York University, where I continue to study the effects of culture in school practices as well as in legal codes. Having been around for 97 years, I have seen the various changes that have occurred and continue to occur in the education world. Although some of my theories from the 60s no longer apply to today's schooling, my connection between culture and the classroom becomes more apparent each day, even now in 2000. When it comes to my theory of how children construct knowledge, I involve 3 basic modes of instruction: enactive, iconic, and symbolic. I feel that this theory has had the biggest impact and has evolved over time in schools everywhere. The enactive mode can be described as learning by doing. This mode is seen mostly in young children, in that they pick up on new ideas and concepts at a much faster rate than full-grown adults. The iconic mode is giving the students an interactive activity in which they can apply the information they are learning in class to something such as a science experiment or interactive boards. Lastly, the symbolic mode is showing understanding through verbal communication.
such as a discussion or debate in class. Developmental growth involves mastering each of the aforementioned modes, and once that has been established, students then will have a deep understanding of the content. I have seen this theory applied in numerous classrooms as educators do their best to implement the information from the textbook and put it into the best methods so that the students will learn. The influence of this theory was well accepted by most educators, and when I look at classrooms today, I can see this theory at the basis of various styles of teaching.
And 12. Hope you enjoyed this little autobiography of myself, Jerome Bruner, and then it may provoke you to look a little more into the world of psychology, into the mind, and to perhaps even read some of my books.